In a small village by the river Niger, Adebayo and Oluwaseun had been married for 15 years. Their home was quiet, with no children running around or laughing. This made them very sad, even though they loved each other. Adebayo was tall and strong, with kind eyes. He worked hard as a fisherman to make money for his family. Every morning he'd wake up early and say to Oluwaseun, "I'm off to the river, my love. Pray for a good catch today." Oluwaseun would nod and reply, "Be safe, Adebayo. I'll have a hot meal waiting when you return." She kept their small house clean and helped other women in the village. She'd often chat with her neighbors while doing laundry or fetching water. "How are your children?" Amina Oluwaseun would ask, trying to hide the pain in her voice. "They're well? Thank God," Amina would reply, then quickly change the subject, knowing how much it hurt Oluwaseun to talk about children. At night, Adebayo and Oluwaseun would sit outside their hut, looking at the stars. They'd talk about their day, but the conversation always circled back to their biggest wish. "Do you think we'll ever have a child of our own?" Oluwaseun would ask, her voice trembling. Adebayo would squeeze her hand and say, "We must keep hoping, my dear. Maybe tomorrow will bring us good news." But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into years, their hope began to fade. They tried to be happy with what they had, but the empty cradle in the corner of their room was a constant reminder of what they were missing. One evening, after a particularly hard day, Adebayo found Oluwaseun crying by the river. He sat down beside her and put his arm around her shoulders. "What's wrong, my love?" he asked, even though he knew the answer. "I saw Binta's new baby today," Oluwaseun sobbed. "She looks so happy." "Will we ever know that joy, Adebayo?" Adebayo sighed heavily. "I don't know, Oluwaseun, but I do know that I love you, child or no child. We have each other, and that's something to be thankful for." Oluwaseun nodded, wiping her tears. They sat there together, watching the river flow, both silently praying for a miracle that seemed more and more unlikely with each passing day. One evening, Oluwaseun was cooking dinner when she heard two old women talking at the well nearby. She stopped stirring the pot and listened closely. "Poor Oluwaseun," said the first woman. "Mama busy 15 years of marriage and no baby. It's so sad." "Shh, keep your voice down," whispered the second woman. Mama aged, she looked around before continuing, "I've heard something interesting. They say the river goddess can give children to those who really want them." Oluwaseun's eyes widened. She held her breath, not wanting the women to know she was listening. The river goddess Mama Busy sounded shocked. "Isn't that dangerous?" Maybe Mama Aid shrugged. "But if you want a child badly enough." The women's voices faded as they walked away. Oluwaseun's hands shook as she went back to cooking. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay next to Adebayo, who was snoring softly. Her mind kept replaying what she'd heard. A river goddess, she thought. Could it be true? Could she really give us a child? Oluwaseun turned to look at Adebayo. She imagined him holding a baby, smiling and laughing. Her heart ached with want. But what if it's just a story, she wondered. What if I'm getting my hopes up for nothing? She closed her eyes, trying to sleep, but the old woman's words kept echoing in her head. A tiny spark of hope had been lit in her heart, and she couldn't ignore it. Maybe, she thought as she finally drifted off, just maybe this could be our chance. Days went by, and Oluwaseun couldn't stop thinking about the river goddess. She tried to act normal, but Adebayo noticed something was different. "Are you feeling okay?" he asked one evening. "You seem distracted lately." Oluwaseun took a deep breath. "Adebayo, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice shaking. She told him about overhearing the old women at the well. As she spoke, Adebayo's face changed from hopeful to worried. "A river goddess?" he asked, frowning. "Oluwaseun, that sounds dangerous. We don't know if it's even real." "But what if it is?" Oluwaseun insisted. "What if this is our chance to have a baby?" Adebayo shook his head. "It's too risky. What if the goddess asks for something we can't give?" Oluwaseun felt tears in her eyes. "We've tried everything else," she said. "The healers, the herbs, the prayers. Nothing has worked. Please, Adebayo, I need to try this." Adebayo was quiet for a long time. He looked at Oluwaseun, saw how much she wanted this. "What exactly are you planning to do?" he asked. "I'll go to the river and call for the goddess," Oluwaseun explained. "I'll ask her to bless us with a child." Adebayo still looked unsure. "And if she appears, what then?" "I'll do whatever she asks," Oluwaseun said firmly, "as long as it gives us a chance to have a baby." Adebayo sighed heavily. I don't like this, Oluwaseun. It feels wrong. I know it's scary, Oluwaseun said, taking his hands, but I have to try. Please understand. Adebayo looked into his wife's pleading eyes. He saw her hope, her desperation. Finally, he nodded slowly. Okay, he said, but promise me you'll be careful. If anything seems too dangerous, come home right away. Promise me, Oluwaseun? Oluwaseun hugged him tightly. I promise, she said. Thank you for understanding. As they held each other, Oluwaseun felt a mix of excitement and fear. She was going to meet the river goddess. She might finally have a chance to be a mother. But what would the goddess ask of her? What risks would she have to take? These questions swirled in her mind as she prepared for her journey to the river. No matter what happened, she knew her life was about to change forever. The next morning, Oluwaseun woke up early. The sun wasn't up yet. She quietly got dressed, trying not to wake Adebayo. Where are you going? Adebayo's sleepy voice startled her. To the river, Oluwaseun whispered. It's time. Adebayo sat up looking worried. Are you sure about this? Oluwaseun nodded. I have to try, my love. Be careful, Adebayo said, hugging her tightly. Oluwaseun left their hut and started walking along the river. As she got further from the village, the noises changed. She couldn't hear people talking or animals in the village anymore. Instead, she heard birds singing and leaves moving in the wind. The air felt heavy and damp. Oluwaseun saw mist floating around her feet. It made her a bit scared. Maybe I should go back, she thought, but then she remembered why she was there. No, I need to do this. I want a baby so much. As she walked, Oluwaseun talked to herself to feel braver. It's okay, Oluwaseun. You can do this. Just keep walking. The forest got thicker. Oluwaseun had to push branches out of her way. I've never been this far from the village before, she realized. What if I get lost? But the thought of having a child made her keep going. I'm doing this for our baby, she said out loud. I won't give up now. Even though she was scared, Oluwaseun kept walking deeper into the forest, following the river. After walking for what seemed like hours, Oluwaseun's legs ached and her feet were sore. The forest had grown denser, making it harder to navigate. She pushed through thick undergrowth, her wrapper catching on thorny bushes. Finally, she stumbled into a small clearing. Oluwaseun gasped, her eyes widening at the sight before her. In the center stood a massive baobab tree, unlike any she had ever seen. Its trunk was enormous, twisted and gnarled, the bark deeply furrowed with age. The tree's branches reached out in all directions, creating a canopy that filtered the sunlight into dappled patterns on the forest floor. At the base of the ancient tree, Oluwaseun noticed a pool of water. It was perfectly still, its surface like a mirror reflecting the leaves and sky above. The water was so clear she could see straight to the bottom. Oluwaseun approached cautiously, her heart pounding. She knelt at the edge of the pool, cupping her hands to scoop up some water. It was cool and refreshing as she sipped it, soothing her parched throat. What a strange place, she murmured to herself, looking around the clearing. Could this be where the river goddess dwells? The air felt different here, charged with an energy she couldn't explain. Oluwaseun sat back on her heels, unsure what to do next. Should she call out to the goddess, wait for a sign? As she pondered her next move, a gentle breeze rustled through the baobab's leaves, creating a sound almost like whispers. Oluwaseun shivered, both excited and nervous about what might happen next in this mystical place. Oluwaseun slowly approached the pool, her legs shaking slightly. Her heart was beating so fast she could feel it in her throat. She carefully knelt down at the water's edge, the damp earth soaking through her wrapper. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Oluwaseun remembered the whispered words she had overheard at the village well. With a trembling voice she spoke, "Great river goddess, I come seeking your blessing. Please hear my plea." She waited, holding her breath. For several long seconds, nothing happened. The clearing remained silent and still. Maybe I did it wrong, Oluwaseun muttered to herself, disappointment creeping in. Just as she was about to try again, the water in the pool started moving. It began to ripple, then churn violently. Oluwaseun scrambled back, her eyes wide with fear and awe. From the swirling water, a figure emerged. It was like nothing Oluwaseun had ever seen before. The river goddess stood before her, shimmering as if made of water itself. Her hair flowed around her like a living river, and her eyes seemed endless, reminding Oluwaseun of the deepest parts of the Niger. The goddess looked directly at Oluwaseun, who found herself unable to look away despite her fear. When the goddess spoke, her voice was surprisingly gentle, sounding like a small stream. "I hear you, child," the goddess said. "What is it you seek from me?" Oluwaseun swallowed hard, trying to find her voice. This was her chance, the moment she had been waiting for. She opened her mouth to speak, praying she would find the right words to convince the goddess to help her. Oluwaseun bowed her head, feeling both scared and amazed. She couldn't look directly at the goddess, so she stared at the ground. "Great goddess," she said very quietly, "please bless me with a child. My husband and I have been married for 15 years, but we don't have any children. We really want a baby to love and take care of." Oluwaseun's voice shook as she spoke. She thought about all the nights she and Adebayo had cried because their home was so quiet. The river goddess looked at Oluwaseun for a long time without saying anything. Oluwaseun couldn't tell what the goddess was thinking. Finally, the goddess spoke. "Having a child is a big thing to ask for," she said. "Are you ready for how hard it can be to raise a child?" Oluwaseun looked up quickly. "Yes, goddess," she said right away. "We will love any child you give us, no matter what problems come with it." The goddess slowly nodded her head. "Okay," she said. "I will give you what you want. But first, you need to do 3 things to show you deserve it. Are you willing to do these tasks?" Oluwaseun felt her heart beat faster with hope. "Yes, goddess. I'll do anything you tell me to do." "Listen carefully," the river goddess said, her voice getting more serious. "First, you need to bring me a feather from the top of the great eagle's head. This eagle lives in the tallest tree in the forest. Second, you need to get 1 scale from the oldest catfish in the deepest part of my river. And last," the goddess stopped talking for a moment and looked right into Oluwaseun's eyes. "You need to spend 1 whole night alone in the middle of the forest. You can only have the clothes you're wearing now." Oluwaseun felt scared when she thought about these hard tasks, but she was still determined to do them. "I understand, goddess. I will do all these things and come back to you." The river goddess nodded again. "Go now. Come back when you've done all 3 tasks. But remember, Oluwaseun, if you fail, bad things could happen. Are you sure you want to do this?" Oluwaseun stopped for a short time to think. The goddess's warning made her feel worried. But then she thought about Adebayo, about the empty baby bed in their house, and about the family they wanted so much. She felt strong again. "I'm sure, goddess. I won't fail," Oluwaseun said firmly. "Very well," the goddess replied. "Remember, Oluwaseun, these tasks will test not just your body, but your mind and spirit as well. The path ahead is dangerous and uncertain, but if you succeed, your reward will be great. Now go, and may the spirits of the river guide you." As the goddess began to sink back into the pool, Oluwaseun called out, "Wait, how will I find the eagle and the catfish?" The goddess paused, half submerged. "Trust your instincts, child. The forest will guide you if your heart is true." With those final words, she disappeared beneath the water's surface. Oluwaseun stood there for a moment, her mind racing with thoughts of the challenges ahead. Then, taking a deep breath, she turned and walked back into the forest, ready to begin her first task. With that, the river goddess sank back into the water, vanishing from sight. Oluwaseun was left alone in the clearing. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves, and then started walking to begin her first task. Finding the great eagle's nest was harder than Oluwaseun thought it would be. She walked through the forest for days, always looking up, trying to see the big bird. Her neck hurt from looking up so much. Her feet were sore from walking, and she was starting to feel sad and tired, but she didn't want to stop trying. On the 4th day, when the sun was going down, Oluwaseun heard a loud screech from the sky. Her heart started beating fast as she saw the huge eagle flying in circles above her. She watched where it was going and followed it. Finally, she saw the nest. It was on top of a very tall iroko tree. "Oh my," Oluwaseun said to herself, looking up at the massive tree. "How am I ever going to climb that?" She sat down at the base of the tree, feeling overwhelmed. "Maybe I should go back," she muttered. "This seems impossible." But then she thought of Adebayo and their empty home. "No," she said firmly, standing up. "I have to try, for us." Oluwaseun walked around the tree, looking for the best way to start climbing. The bark was rough and full of knots and bumps. She reached out and touched it, trying to get a good grip. "All right," she said, taking another deep breath. "Here goes nothing." She put her foot on a low knot in the tree and started to pull herself up. It was hard work, and she slipped a few times, scraping her arms and legs. But each time she slipped, she thought of the child she and Adebayo might have, and it gave her the strength to keep going. Oluwaseun walked up to the tree. It was so big around that she couldn't put her arms all the way around it. She had never climbed such a tall tree before. She felt scared but knew she had to try. "This is for our child," she said to herself. Then she started to climb. Going up the tree was very hard. Oluwaseun's arms shook because she was so tired. A few times she almost fell. But every time she wanted to stop, she thought about the baby she wanted. This made her try harder. "I can do this," she muttered, pulling herself up another branch. "I have to do this." After climbing for what felt like many hours, Oluwaseun finally reached the eagle's nest. The big bird wasn't there. The nest was huge and had soft feathers in it. Oluwaseun's hands were shaking as she carefully took one feather from the nest. She put it in her wrapper to keep it safe. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty nest. "I promise we'll be good parents." As she started to climb down, she heard the eagle screech again. She looked up and saw the big bird flying straight at her with its claws out. "Oh no," Oluwaseun cried. She climbed down as fast as she could. Her heart was beating very fast, and she was breathing hard. Just as she got to the ground, she felt the eagle fly right over her head. It was so close that she could feel the air move. "That was too close," she gasped, her legs shaking. Oluwaseun ran away from the tree. She ran until she couldn't hear the eagle anymore. Then she fell down on the ground, very tired. She took out the feather and looked at it. It was shiny and beautiful. "I did it," she said, smiling even though she was exhausted. "I really did it." Oluwaseun sat there for a while, catching her breath. She thought about the 2 tasks she still had to do. "I hope the next ones aren't as scary," she said. "But even if they are, I'll do them, for our family." She carefully put the feather back in her wrapper and stood up. Her body was sore, and she was very tired. But she felt proud of what she had done. Adebayo would be proud too, she thought. "I wish I could tell him about this." Oluwaseun looked around, trying to figure out which way to go next. "Now, where do I find that old catfish?" she wondered out loud. "I guess I'll have to find the deepest part of the river. But first, I need to rest a bit." She found a comfortable spot under a tree and sat down, keeping the precious feather close to her. As she rested, she thought about Adebayo and the child they might soon have. It made her smile, despite all the challenges ahead. Oluwaseun stood at the edge of the river, looking at the dark water. She felt worried. Finding the oldest catfish in such a big river seemed very hard. "How am I going to do this?" she said to herself. "The river is so big." For many days, Oluwaseun walked in the shallow parts of the river. She looked carefully for any sign of the old catfish. But every night, she had to go back to the river bank without finding anything. She felt sad and wanted to give up. On the 5th day, Oluwaseun was ready to stop trying. But then she saw an old fisherman fixing his nets near the river. "Maybe he can help me," she thought. Oluwaseun walked over to the old man. "Excuse me, Baba," she said politely. "I'm trying to find the oldest catfish in the river. Do you know where it might be?" The old fisherman looked at her with surprise. "The oldest catfish," he said. "That's a very dangerous thing to look for, my child. Why do you want to find it?" Oluwaseun hesitated. She didn't want to tell him about the river goddess. It's for something very important to me," she said. The old man nodded slowly. "I see," he said. "Well, if you're sure you want to do this, I can tell you where to look. But be careful." "I will," Baba Oluwaseun promised. "Please, tell me where to go." "You'll find the oldest catfish in the deepest part of the river," the fisherman said. "Where the water is so dark, it looks like night, but it's very dangerous there. Are you sure you want to go?" Oluwaseun nodded. "Yes, I'm sure. Thank you for your help, Baba." The old man sighed. "Be safe, child. May the river spirits watch over you." Oluwaseun thanked him again and started walking along the river. As she went, the trees around her got thicker and the river got deeper and darker. After walking for a long time, Oluwaseun came to a place where the water looked very dark. It was so dark that she couldn't see into it at all. "This must be the place," she said. She felt scared but knew she had to be brave. Oluwaseun took a deep breath and stepped into the water. It was very cold and she gasped. "It's so cold," she said, shivering. But she kept going, swimming out to the middle of the river. As she swam, trying to see into the dark water, something touched her leg. Oluwaseun jumped, feeling scared. "What was that?" she said, her voice shaking. Suddenly, a huge shape came up from under the water. It was the biggest catfish Oluwaseun had ever seen. Its whiskers were as long as her arm. The big fish looked at her with old, wise eyes. Oluwaseun was scared but tried to be brave. "Great catfish," she said, her voice shaking a little. "The river goddess sent me. May I please have one of your scales?" To her surprise, the catfish didn't swim away. Instead, it came closer to her. It turned its side towards her, as if it was saying yes. With shaking hands, Oluwaseun carefully took one scale from the big fish. As soon as she did, the catfish went back under the water. "Thank you," Oluwaseun called after it. Holding the scale tightly, Oluwaseun swam back to the shore. Her heart was beating fast, and she felt both scared and happy. "I did it," she said, smiling as she climbed out of the water. "I really did it. 2 tasks done, just 1 more to go." She carefully put the scale with the eagle feather in her wrapper. "I wonder what Adebayo would say if he could see me now," she thought. "He'd probably be worried, but I think he'd be proud too." Oluwaseun sat down on the river bank to rest. She was very tired, but she felt good about what she had done. "Just 1 more task," she said to herself. "I can do this, for our family." Oluwaseun looked at the forest, feeling scared. She had to spend a whole night alone in the middle of the woods. Just thinking about it made her shake a little, but she knew she couldn't stop now. She had already done 2 hard tasks. "I can do this," she said to herself, trying to be brave. "I've come this far. I can't give up now." As the sun started to go down, Oluwaseun walked deeper into the forest. The trees were very close together. Their branches crossed over each other above her head, making it hard to see the sky. It was getting dark fast. Oluwaseun could hear strange sounds all around her. An owl made a loud hoot sound. She could hear animals moving in the bushes, but she couldn't see them. "Hello," she called out softly, then felt silly. Of course, no one answered. Oluwaseun kept walking, looking for a good place to stay for the night. Her heart was beating fast, and she jumped at every little sound. "I wish Adebayo was here," she said to herself. "He would know what to do." She thought about her husband waiting for her back in the village. What would he say if he knew where she was right now? "Be strong, my love," she imagined him saying. "You are braver than you know." This made Oluwaseun feel a little better. She stood up straighter and kept walking. After a while, she found a small open space between some big trees. "This looks like a good spot," she said. She sat down with her back against a tree. As it got darker, the forest seemed to come alive with more sounds. Oluwaseun could hear more animals moving around. She saw some eyes shining in the dark, watching her. "Stay away," she said in a shaky voice. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling cold and alone. The night seemed very long. "I can do this," she kept saying to herself. "I can do this for our baby." Oluwaseun tried to stay awake, but she was very tired. Her eyes started to close. Suddenly, she heard a loud growl nearby. Her eyes flew open, and she sat up straight. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice shaking with fear. There was no answer, just more growling. Oluwaseun could see 2 big, shining eyes looking at her from the darkness. She wanted to run away, but she remembered what the river goddess said. She had to stay in the forest all night. "Be brave," she whispered to herself. "Be brave for Adebayo and our future child." Oluwaseun closed her eyes tight and waited to see what would happen next. Suddenly, a big leopard came out of the shadows. It moved smoothly like water. Oluwaseun wanted to run away or yell for help, but she couldn't move. She was too scared. The leopard came closer, always looking at her. Oluwaseun closed her eyes tight. She thought the leopard would hurt her, and her quest would end badly. But the leopard didn't bite or scratch her. Instead, Oluwaseun felt something warm. She opened her eyes slowly. The leopard had lain down next to her. Its body was touching hers, like it was trying to keep her warm. Oluwaseun was surprised. Carefully, she reached out her hand and touched the leopard's fur. It was soft. The big cat started to make a deep, happy sound. "Are you?" purring, Oluwaseun asked, amazed. "I didn't know leopards could do that." The leopard just blinked at her slowly. "Thank you for not eating me," Oluwaseun said. She laughed a little, still feeling scared but also relieved. All night, the leopard stayed with Oluwaseun. It kept her safe from other dangers in the forest. "You know," Oluwaseun said to the leopard after a while, "I'm doing all this for a baby. Adebayo and I, we've wanted one for so long." The leopard's ear twitched, like it was listening. "I wonder if you have cubs," Oluwaseun continued. "Is that why you're being nice to me? Do you understand what it's like to want a family?" As the sky started to get light, the leopard got up. It stretched like a house cat. Then, without making any noise, it went back into the forest. "Goodbye," Oluwaseun called softly, "and thank you." She stood up, feeling stiff and tired, but happy. She had made it through the night. "I did it," she said, smiling. "I really did it. All 3 tasks are done." Oluwaseun started walking, ready to go back to the river goddess. She felt excited and a little nervous. "I hope the goddess will be pleased," she said to herself. "I wonder what will happen next." Exhausted and overwhelmed, Oluwaseun made her way back to the clearing where she had first encountered the river goddess. Her heart raced as she approached the pool of water, her legs shaky from the challenging tasks she had completed. "Great river goddess," she called out, her voice rough and dry. "I finished the task you gave me." The water started to bubble and swirl, and the river goddess emerged from the depths. She looked at Oluwaseun with curiosity in her eyes. "You've come back," the goddess said. "Show me what you've brought." Oluwaseun's hands shook as she held out the eagle feather and the catfish scale. "I also spent the night in the middle of the forest, like you told me to," she added. The river goddess slowly nodded. "You've done well with 2 of the tasks," she said. "But tell me, were you really by yourself in the forest last night?" Oluwaseun's stomach dropped. "A leopard came to me during the night," she admitted quietly. "It stayed with me until morning." The goddess frowned. "Then you didn't complete the last task," she said in a cold voice. "You were supposed to be completely alone." Oluwaseun started to cry. "Please, goddess," she begged. "I didn't ask for the leopard to come. I was terrified. But I stayed in the forest like you said. Doesn't that count for anything?" The river goddess didn't speak for a while, just staring at Oluwaseun. Finally, she broke the silence. "You've shown bravery and determination," Oluwaseun the goddess said, "but the tasks were important. The child you want won't come without a cost." Oluwaseun's heart beat faster. "What do you mean?" "I'll give you a child," the river goddess explained, "but because you didn't finish all 3 tasks perfectly, the child will have a blessing from the river and a curse." Oluwaseun felt scared. "What kind of curse?" she asked nervously. The goddess looked deep into Oluwaseun's eyes. "Your child will be strong and healthy, and he'll eat well. But he'll also smell like the river, a strong smell that will make him different from others." Oluwaseun felt dizzy. A child with a bad smell, how would the village accept him? How would he make friends or find someone to love? But then she thought about the empty cradle at home and how sad Adebayo looked when he saw other men playing with their children. I'll take the child," Oluwaseun said softly. The river goddess nodded seriously. "It's done," she said. "Go back to your husband. You'll have a son soon. Remember, Oluwaseun, that real love doesn't care about how someone looks or smells." With those words, the goddess went back under the water, leaving Oluwaseun alone again. Oluwaseun stood there for a moment, trying to understand what had just happened. She felt a mix of joy and worry. As she began her journey home, she talked to herself. "What will I tell Adebayo?" she wondered out loud. "How will I explain this blessing and curse?" As she walked, she imagined the future. "Our son will be strong," she said, trying to convince herself. "He'll be healthy. That's what matters most, right?" But doubt crept in. But the smell. How will the other children treat him? Will they be kind or cruel? Oluwaseun stopped by a stream to rest and drink some water. As she cupped the cool liquid in her hands, she made a decision. "No matter what happens," she said firmly, "I will love this child with all my heart. I will teach him to be proud of who he is, smell and all." With renewed determination, Oluwaseun continued her journey home. She practiced what she would say to Adebayo. "My love," she rehearsed, "the river goddess has blessed us with a child. He will be special in many ways." As the village came into view, Oluwaseun took a deep breath. "We wanted a child so badly," she reminded herself. "Now we will have one. Everything else, we'll face it together." With that thought, she quickened her pace, eager to share the news with Adebayo and begin this new chapter in their lives. The journey home seemed to go by quickly. Oluwaseun's head was full of different feelings: happiness about finally having a baby, fear about the problems they might face, and guilt because she didn't finish the last task perfectly. When she finally got home, tired and dirty, Adebayo ran to hug her. He looked worried and relieved at the same time. "Oluwaseun, where were you?" "I was so scared," Adebayo said, holding her tight. Oluwaseun started crying because she was so tired and emotional. She told Adebayo everything that happened with the river goddess. Adebayo listened quietly, his face not showing what he was thinking. "A child," he said softly when she finished talking. "We're going to have a child." Oluwaseun nodded, crying too much to speak. Adebayo hugged her close. "No matter what problems come," Adebayo said, "we'll face them together. Tell me more about what the goddess said." Oluwaseun wiped her eyes. She said, "Our son will be strong and healthy, but he'll smell like the river. It might be hard for him." Adebayo thought for a moment. "A strong, healthy son is a blessing. The smell, we'll figure it out." "But what if the other children are mean to him?" Oluwaseun asked, worried. "Then we'll teach him to be brave and kind," Adebayo said firmly. "We'll love him no matter what." Oluwaseun felt a little better hearing Adebayo's words. "I was so scared you'd be angry," she admitted. Adebayo shook his head. "No, my love. We wanted a child so badly. This is a gift, even if it comes with challenges." They sat together, talking about their future and the child they would soon have. As the sun set, Oluwaseun felt hope growing in her heart. Whatever happened, they would face it as a family.